Good evening, everybody, and welcome to our How to Repair Pendulum Clocks live stream. I was just trying to put something in the chat there, but it didn't work. Cut and paste. I didn't realize there was a character limit. But anyway, very warm welcome and live stream. I was just trying to check that the sound is working. It's all good. Hope you're all okay. And great to see you. We've, as always, had a busy clock week with various projects that are going on. So thank you to everybody, as always, who have been on Facebook. And a special thank you to those people who bought our book this week. So hope that works out well. Getting some nice reviews on Amazon, and also some nice reviews and feedback on our depthing and bushing e-publication, which is available on the Kindle app. You don't need a Kindle. Anyway, so that's really cool. So thank you. That keeps the lights on, as the saying goes. So to new people here, or people who found this video on our sort of archive channel for the live stream, this is one of several kind of support processes, not quite the right word, but for beginners in clock repair. So we wrote a book a year or so ago now, and from that we started a Facebook group, and then we started a weekly Open Clock Club, which is a support group which we hold on a Saturday night. You can find it here online and the archive of that. And then we started a live stream on a Thursday. And in that live stream, we have been fixing an early 19th century European long case clock. And we're kind of getting into the final sort of, not exactly the final furlong, but we've certainly turned that last corner, and the end is now in sight, at least for the movement. So last week we've been doing all sorts. We've done pivoting, you name it, we've done it almost. And last week we, nice to see you all there, Jeremy, Jim, Ian, Sam, thank you for joining us. Last week we extended, I don't know if I get the old camera to focus, we extended, you can see the silver solder joint there, the square on the gathering arbor. And the reason for that was that if you know these clocks, you will know that there's normally a hole drilled through here. And at some point, what that does is a pin passes through that hole, and it holds this component on here, which is called the gathering pallet. So this is part of the striking mechanism, rotates in this direction. And what had happened is, for whatever reason, that pin had maybe got pushed in too hard, and the arbor had split and broken off. So there was no way of holding this device on, this gathering pallet on. So maybe in conjunction with that pin being pushed through, who knows, this gathering pallet, you may or may not be able to see there, how far we can go in and it's still focused. Let's try. Yeah, there we are. I can just about see that this gathering pallet is cracked. It's actually cracked across the square. And so what that means is that when it's on the square like this, let's just get it, goes on one way better than the rest. There we are. It's actually floppy, which is no good, because that's just going to get worse and worse and worse. So hi, Ken, and hi, Vicky. Hi, Simon. Thank you for joining us. So as always with these things, although it's not overt in how to repair pendulum clocks, I do occasionally, usually 2 or 3 times a day, get on my soapbox and try and urge people towards what I call conservation or conservative practice. And what that means in this case is keeping that component, the gathering pallet, and trying our best to repair it, to retain it. So that's what we're going to do. Now, it's been made more tricky than it might have been, because when the end was broken off here, somebody had tried to secure this device by soft soldering. Now, the problem with soft soldering is that it'll have been lead-based solder, is that it's incredibly difficult to get anything else to stick to that patch where the soldering has been. So you've kind of got to scrub all the material away. I discovered this in my old life as a retail jeweler, that any piece of jewelry that's been soft soldered is an absolute nightmare then to go and hard solder it on top. So we've got a challenge here, but we're going to give it a go. And remember our 3 golden rules of soldering. One is that you've got to have clean materials, otherwise the solder won't stick. The second one is you've got to have somewhere for the solder to go. So in this case, we've got a surface which is not particularly flat in the first place. But if we just heat it up and put a blob of solder on there, it is just going to be that. It's going to be a blob of solder that sits on the surface, and it doesn't actually hold those 2 components, the 2 parts of the component together. And the third thing is you've got to get the thing up to temperature. If you have your solder on for too long, then the heat from the flame will tarnish or oxidize the work, and you'll end up with just a mess. So we had a really great time last week because it all went well, which was a bit of a miracle, but really happy with this. If you weren't here last week, we put a heat sink on here, and you can just see the discoloration has started to go into the pivot, but it got as far as our heat sink and then it stopped. So all round really successful, super happy with that. So let's hope we can have something like the same level of success this week. So the first thing we're going to do is, although it's cracked, we're going to make those cracks worse because, as I said, I don't know whether it's really going to be successful to try and draw this. I'll have a go because looking at that fiddly bit of metal. Drawing paper, got on the floor. All sorts of exciting things going on in our Facebook group at the moment. I think I've probably already lost it, but somewhere I've got a screw plate, which, where's it gone? Oh, maybe it'll crop up, which we bought today. And we did the unboxing of our Fusey clock. One of our followers, one of our supporters, asked us to talk about mainsprings from Fusey clocks. And so went online and bought ourselves a nice little Fusey driven clock, which we're going to work on Saturday. And so to go through the kind of anatomy of the Fusey clock and also look at mainsprings as well. In a Fusey clock, you've got a much bigger challenge with the mainspring even than a normal clock, because that device called the Fusey is meant to be kind of matched to the mainspring. Anyway, so that's on Saturday, 6 o'clock British summer time. If you can join us then, that would be great. So what we've got here is, let's just zoom out a little bit. We've got a component with a square hole running through the center, but I don't know, let's say the gathering pallet goes off like that. This component something like that is actually cracked at least 3/4 of the way through. So a bit of that's probably a bit dramatic, but we've got a crack and it runs across like that as well. It's not even straight, unfortunately. And then we've got a little one on this side that runs down there, so it's just kind of broken apart. So if we put our solder on there, it's unlikely to be successful because the solder won't magically automatically run into those cracks if we just kind of put a blob of solder here. It's not going to be strong enough. And of course, there is a bit of an issue because where you've got that square and the square component fitting together, it's like having a winding key with a clock that's a sloppy fit, and which is a great opportunity for me to get on my winding key soapbox and basically get it in the neck for star keys. I don't like them, I'm afraid. They bring me out in a cold sweat. So if you've got a clock, get the actual right key that fits the clock. I think those kind of universal things, they're called bench keys. I don't like them. So there you go. Don't know why I'm talking about that. Oh yeah, because if you've got a bad fitting winding key on a clock, then it'll damage the key, but it'll also damage the square. So in this case, if we don't repair this and make it a really good fit, then the square is going to get damaged. And then eventually we're going to have to drill this, and then you've got the pinion in the way. So more problems. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to file a notch in the end here like this, sort of a V notch. And then I'm also going to file or cut with my piercing saw. I haven't quite thought about it yet. I'll make it up as I go along. Another notch, you can't see it there because it's on the outside, that runs down like that. Not a lot I can do here about the inside because it's got all this soft solder on it. I'm going to try and file it off a little bit, but the problem is there'll still be some soft solder there, and I don't think our hard solder is going to stick unless we file loads of material away, and then it's kind of defeating the object. So always nice to do a little drawing to calm things down. Sam is very excited about this fusee development. Oh gosh, well, I'm very excited about it as well. And we went to look here in York. There are 2 or 3 auction houses. We went to look yesterday at what I thought was a fusee clock. So I want one that's got a line. We had that question this week about how do you tie the line on a fusee clock? Don't use wire rope, by the way. So we dealt with that, but I also want a chain-driven fusee clock. And I was hoping this one at the auction was going to be a chain-driven fusee clock, but when I got there, it wasn't even a fusee clock. It was one of those sort of going barrel things, which is fine, but not good for what we want. So over the next few weeks, we'll deal with both those types. So yeah, be a good little adventure. So I've got my file. It's quite a coarse one. Somebody was asking on the Facebook group about files this week, which needle file should I get? And that's kind of a difficult question to answer because you really need sort of as many, build them up into a collection over the years. But what I would say, as you can see here, it's not completely flat, but I've stoned off one set of teeth here, all the tops off them anyway. You can see it shining in the light, because otherwise, although this is a square file, it doesn't actually file. It doesn't actually file a square hole. It files a squidgy thing. Oh, here we are. Here was our picture from the Facebook group. What you should do, so whether it's a 3 square file or a square file, you should stone off one side so it makes it useful. So I am going to actually clear out the hole a little bit, but as I say, I don't want to take off too much material. Otherwise, it's just going to make it bigger. So we were talking maybe last week or the week before, I can't remember, about squares and how they're tapered. And of course, it's no coincidence. The files are also tapered. So when you look at this on the file, it's already a really good fit. You don't really have sort of parallel surfaces in these old clocks, like you might do in a modern clock that's machine made. So if I can just stop talking for a second. And yeah, it'll be really great if you've, Sam needs to buy sort of a fusee clock. That's absolutely right, a 2-train fusee clock. In this auction as well, it sounds like I've got loads and loads of money to spend, but I wanted to buy I think one of the Facebook group people showed a weight-driven German wall clock, one of the ones that is often called a Vienna. And they used, when I first started all those decades and decades ago, they were like really expensive. And they've just dropped and dropped and dropped and dropped in value, which is a great shame. But I thought I'll buy one of those as well, because those clocks have got because those clocks have got Harrison's maintaining power, a deadbeat escapement, and star wheel and jumper striking. So I thought, brilliant, buy a clock. We can do it on Open Clock Club. And we've got 3 really interesting points there. But again, when I got there, it was a spring-driven clock, so it didn't have any of those features. Although it did, rather like Sam's French clock, have a mock gridiron with 3 bars. So it looked a bit like zinc and steel gridiron, but it wasn't. Zinc and steel would have 5 bars, wouldn't it? Anyway, right. So I've kind of messed about with that, cleaning out the hole. I don't want to take too much material off there. So I'm going to get stuck in now and actually start filing the gathering pallet. In fact, I'm going to use 3 square file for this, if I can find one. So a 3 square file is a triangle section. And in fact, for making square holes, the square one's useful for kind of getting the thing started. But if you imagine the files kind of got 90-degree corners, obviously. Yeah, I was reading the live chat, sorry. So when you file, inevitably the corner gets more than 90 degrees, so the whole thing becomes kind of bellied. So once you've got your square undersized with your square section file, you actually make it to fit with a triangular section file, because then you can actually get in the corners. And again, if you look here, I've ground off or stoned off 1 complete set of teeth here, so you can actually get into the corners nice and sharp. When you do this, don't do it on an offhand grinder, because it'll build up too much temperature and it'll draw the temper of the teeth. So use a stone. All right, okay, so rather awkwardly, the crack is running in the across the work. I must say, this has been this week I've been mainly working on a watch, so not clock stuff at all. And this jeweler's holding device thing has been incredibly useful for holding those tiny parts. Yeah, I mean, this, gosh, it's in a real mess. This thing is just sort of crumbling apart. Anyway, if that'll focus, you can see maybe there that I've filed that V. Let's just see that. But there really isn't a lot to this component. So whether it's going to survive or not, we'll see. Now I'm going to file along. Along the crack, hopefully without the thing completely falling apart. It's also challenges because either, put my glasses on, either you can see or I can see, but we can't seem to get a situation where we can both see. I'm sure there's a way around it. I think it's more important that you can see, and I'll just kind of fumble about and get there eventually. So I'm filing along. And I know there'll be people who would say you should make a new one because it'll be smarter or something. And I kind of get that, but I'd rather try and do something with this first. And if it kind of all just turns into one great big mush, then so be it, and we'll start again with a new piece of material. Yeah, it's really pretty sort of grim. So I'm just filing down the other side now. You can see there's rust falling off it. Who knows? I'm so encouraged by last week's results that kind of willing to try anything at the moment. Also, my watch work from this week has spurred me on to try and fix more different things. I'm just going to file into the corners a little bit within the square, because again, I'd like, if I can, some solder just to kind of run down the inside. A little bit. Remember, it's the corners that kind of do the work. All right, the whole thing is basically completely fallen apart now, so not a good look. It's not looking great, I'm afraid. I'm going to file across the end just to reach some new material. You can see how rusty it is by all the rust that's fallen off onto the bench. So let's just arm ourselves with a 4-inch file and just removing as little material as I can to get to new material. You can see that there. We will we'll have a go at soldering it and see how it goes. Nothing to lose now, I'm afraid. It's all looking pretty desperate. Oh, well, nothing ventured, nothing gained. What I'm going to do is just move that across to one side. Move across to the side so I can still see the live chat. That's much more important. Yeah, it's well, yeah, I get that question a lot about, once we've done the single train clock, the Enfield clock, then 2-train Enfield clock, how do you progress? What comes next? And I think the answer there would be a French clock, a count wheel striking, and also rack striking French clock, but only because they're kind of really quite accessible in terms of cost. But inevitably, at one point, people developing their practice are going to want to work on a fusee clock. And I know Jane, I haven't seen her name. Right, I'm just trying to keep up with the live chat. I know Jane had a chain fusee clock, which she did a brilliant job on, but a real sort of challenge to start on that because those things can be really quite brutal. So maybe a line fusee is a nicer place to begin. Right, you can tell I'm at the faffing stage now, sort of putting off the inevitable. I think what I might do here to prevent it from, because it's really just falling apart, just to try and give it half a chance when we are soldering it, is I'm going to put some iron binding wire around it, because I've got a feeling that it's so kind of so movable that when we start to heat it, it's just going to drop apart. This is one of those things where the customer rings up in about 6 months' time and they say, "Oh, that clock you repaired, it's just struck 375 times because the gathering pallet fell apart." Yeah, I think a little bit of iron binding wire here is not going to do any harm. Mustn't file any more off, otherwise it's just going to drop apart. So iron binding wire, really useful stuff to have around for holding when soldering. Somebody on the Facebook group again was asking about making a pendulum bob. And so I sent them some pictures of doing that. That's good fun, new making. And again, you need iron binding wire for that. So let's just wrap this up. Yeah, the bronze or steel wire, it's just one of those, who is it who started doing this junk in the middle of the, probably, I don't know, in the middle of the 20th century sometime. If your clock has got a chain fusee, then the fusee will be cut for a chain. It'll have a square section fusee. And if it's for a line, that's a gut line, then it'll have a concave section groove for the line. Don't put the phosphor bronze on. I did a sort of dissertation on it once, and it just work hardens and breaks, and it also damages the clock. We'll see on Saturday the iron line. Don't use it. It's kind of a nice idea, I think. It sort of feels like it's kind of a bit of engineering, but I'm sure on in engineering applications, that's exactly the right thing. But in a clock, you don't want, I think it's a rule of 20 times, you want a minimum of 20 times the radius of the wire to prevent it hardening and breaking. And the small end of a fusee cone's about 16 millimeters normally. And so the wire just breaks. Just use a really good quality gut line. Don't know if that's going to do any good, but it might just prevent it from, makes me feel better. Okay, done enough faffing about. So as last week, I'm going to use borax for my flux. Get some water in there. Should have done this earlier. Like that. Mix up some flux. Yeah, when I did this dissertation when I was a student, I made a machine that bent, because as you know, if you don't know about fusee clocks, and apologies for going off on a bit of a tangent with the live chat, blame it on Samony. And they, if you let the clock run down, the line bends through 90 degrees, which is one of the places where the metal lines break. and I made a machine that bent, it wound backwards and forwards 24/7, drove everybody completely bonkers, bending the line, and the natural gut line bent 100,000 times. And I stopped the kind of experiment because it just seemed to be almost indestructible. Really incredible stuff. Well, when you think what it does inside a cow, then you can kind of imagine how useful it is. Have used synthetic line as well on weight-driven clocks like regulators. There's a product called Dyneema, which is a kind of a trade name. I think it's a kind of polyester, and multi-stranded polyester, really useful material for weight lines for regulators. And it comes with like a black covering on it as well, sometimes a woven black covering. So it looks really smart, incredibly strong. Right. Okay, I might go a bit bonkers here with all the flux because we've got one chance here. One opportunity. So I'm going to, again, flatten out a bit of wire, silver solder wire, and sort of lay it in that little V-shaped notch that I've made. Let's get that a bit thicker. And there we go. So see that? Plenty of flux on there. That'll run down inside as we begin to heat it. So I'll just set that to one side for a second and find our solder. Charcoal block. Oh. So here's our solder, same stuff we used last week. It was the easiest, as in the lowest melting temperature silver solder I could find. And just gonna flatten a bit more like we did last week. A bit of steel wool just to clean it up, even though it's pretty clean. Just want to get that oxide off there just to give ourselves every single chance of making this into a success. Okay, so let's just cut a bit off. Don't need much. A little goes a long way. And also in terms of it's actually really hard to file it. It's great material, but quite difficult to file. So we don't want to put acres and acres on there. I just saw somewhere at the corner of my eye. Oh, there it is. Festival of Speed is on at the moment today, Thursday, down in Goodwood. Reminds me of the old days when I was at college. You can hear the cars if you're into that kind of thing. When you're in the workshop, it's really cool. If that's your bag. I used to fix the clocks at Goodwood House, which was nice, a nice gig. Right, so we've got our bit of solder here, and we've got our gathering pallet here. I'm just going to figure out a way of getting those two to fit together. There we go. So the you can see that the solder's actually sitting in the little gap in the gathering pallet. Sure, I've got enough on there. I think I probably have. Anyway, one way to find out. So let's just put that on there. Fire brick there behind it to reflect heat. We want to heat it up as reasonably quickly as we can. We don't want to be hanging around. So what you do is you heat it for a few, well, maybe not even a few seconds. Yeah, a few seconds, quite gently, which drives off the water. If you go in there with your gas like straight away, the water boils and it sort of puffs the flux off. Just put a bit more flux on there for good measure. Right, I think that'll do. So I've got my water ready. So I'm going to use water not to harden the work, but to shock off the flux. The flux is really vitreous, so it's a pain to get it off. You can use caustic soda if you're using a non-ferrous material to get the flux off. But sometimes if you shock it by putting it in cold water, it knocks most of it off. So look. All right, Jeremy says he's done the Festival of Speed many times on 2 or 3 wheels. Oh, is that a combination or a must be combination? Gas keeps blowing itself out. Annoying. See the flux boiling. You can see that solder is actually kind of moving there. I can see what's happened. The solder's gone down one side, not the other. So very quickly dove in with a bit more solder there just to catch the other side, as I suggested might. All right, yeah, Jeremy says a reverse trike like the old Morgan. I saw they started making those Morgan 3-wheelers again. Look good fun. Oh, scary. So the solder that I put on there, it lifted up on the bubbling flux, kind of floated off to one side and then appeared to solder the worst side of it. So that was good. There was nothing on the other side. So I just went in there very quickly with another bit of solder. So I think that might actually be a time for us to, let's just have a look and check it's something like. Well, solder's definitely melted. Whether it's got in the right place or not, I don't know. Not really. It's kind of dropped down inside, so not massively successful. Just gonna have another go with it like this. And maybe just clean it up a little bit more again. So not looking great. Quite a big gap there to kind of bridge. I think that's also partly the problem. I had considered putting a tube inside there, getting a bit of bushing wire, filing it flat, drilling it out, putting a tube inside, and then having a lot of brass to solder away, which I thought would take ages, but actually it might need that to give it the, oh, dropped it now, to give it the support it needs. That might have been a longer way around, but also maybe stronger. Yeah, there's just kind of not enough material there, really. So I think that's probably, oh, get in the shot so you can see it. Poor thing. Probably the answer is to clean it out and then get a bit of bushing wire, file it square, drill out the center. So we've basically got a square of brass and then solder that in. Then it will prevent the solder from kind of just running inside, because what it's not done is to have filled up the gap. The solder's run down inside, but there's still a great big crack here. So it's, yeah, not looking particularly, not looking particularly positive. I think it's rescuable still, but of course with these things, you have to sort of say, well, when do I quit and just make a new one? Now it looks like it has completely pretty much fallen apart. So we're probably approaching that quitting and making a new one stage quite rapidly. If we were going to make a new one, a couple of ways of doing it. You could fabricate it, make basically this out of one piece of material and solder it to this. But how I prefer to do it is to get a bit of steel and quite a job, drill a hole through. So work in the edge of the steel, drill a hole through, then use a hacksaw to hack this out. And then, then harden and temper it. So possibilities. I think I'm going to give it one last chance, but probably what we're going to have to do is to wait till next week to do that now, because I need to clear up the hole, which is now full of flux and general nastiness. But you can see there that the edge of it has actually begun to break away. So it's not looking great there, I'm afraid. Can't say we didn't try. Gathering pallet is not a happy patient. But Sam and Ian are having a nice chat in the margins about fusee clocks, so that's good. And I was talking to Jeremy about the Festival of Speed. It's Festival of Speed on this week, so that's nice to see the live stream. Anyhow. Poor thing. Just have a little bit of an investigation of some some steel, see what we've got in stock. So ideally, to me, if I was going to make a new one, ideally I'd use a bit of EN8, which is about 0.4% carbon. So it's a mid-carbon steel. A lot easier to work than tool steel. But it's only available in rod, I think, for the kind of sizes we buy. It's an industry standard thing. So you get a bit of rod, and then you would, again, file it and then drill across. It's drilling a hole that's a problem. Not a problem, but I do have some gauge plate here, but I don't think it's quite deep enough. It's not far off, but it's too shallow. Although you could maybe forge it down. It's only about millimeter. You see it there on that edge, millimeter too shallow. So you might just be able to forge it, but actually probably easier. Let's have a look. Buy some EN8 or a new bit of gauge plate. So you really need 6 millimeter. Oh, there might be an imperial equivalent that's a bit closer, but a bit of 6 millimeter gauge plate. And then what we would do is, if you imagine that being cut out of there, so I would sew along here, and I'll maybe do it that way around. Doesn't really make any difference. Or maybe if I didn't do it that way around. So sew along here with hacksaw, sew along here with a hacksaw, but you would drill the hole first. That's the beauty of having a big piece of material. Always drill the hole first. That could work if it was a bit thicker. So that's probably the end of our gathering pallet for this week. I'm going to have another go at it, but the problem is that the hole now is full of flux. So that's slightly tricky, but I'll just explain what I'll do is that I'll get, just see if I can find some bushing wire. And then we will leave this for the time being and think about our last big repair, which is our wheel bridge. So let's just eke out a bit of bushing wire. So this is 1.7. So it's 1.7 cross flats. So we need something that's 1.7 times 1.41, square root of 2. Get the old calculator out. For Mr. Calculator. 1.7 times 1.41. So 2.4 diameter. So let's see if we've got any 2.5. Not masses. Is that 2.5? Not even bushing wire, it's a bit of wire rod. Okay, so there's a bit of bushing wire. There we go. So a bit of bushing wire that will file down to the size that we want. If we make the wire the same size as the square, then we can use that as a kind of former. We know it's going to be in the ballpark. I don't think the brass is strong enough on its own. I think we need some steel around it. Oh, that's maybe a good question. Maybe it would be okay. I don't know. Just thinking about how this thing actually operates. So it locks on this face. So it's going to tend to open it up here. So I'm not convinced that putting brass inside it and soldering it is going to be strong enough. We need more on the outside. Anyhow, so yeah, what I'll do is file this square, clean this out, get that in the middle, and then broach this piece of bushing wire out until it's as thin walled as I dare. I'll leave it long at either end like that, and then solder the whole thing, and then the solder will want to stick to the brass, and hopefully that'll give us some support. If that doesn't work, then I will call it a day and make one out of a bit of, I'll probably get some EN8 because it's just such a lot easier to work with. gauge plate's a brilliant material, but it's an absolute pig to file and everything. So that's that for now. Didn't quite work out as it might have done, but there you go. Look in the box of bits for our wheel bridge. So other than making the hands, this is probably, find out where the camera's gone, probably the last kind of major repair we've got on this clock, apart from the case, of course. So what we've got here is the clock had fallen over or something. I don't know if you remember, but look back through the archive. The center arbor was bent over. We straightened that. That was really successful. The back pivot was wrecked. We replaced that. That was successful. And the last thing is that this it's a bit bent in. If you look along its length, a little bit bent in, but I don't think that's a major problem. So the pipe here, you can see it's quite thin. It's about 0.5 mil has broken off. So if we had like a medium-sized lathe, Myford lathe or something, what I would do is I would turn a bit of wood, put a bit of wood in the 4-jaw chuck or 3-jaw chuck, turn it flat, turn a point on it until it fit in there like a boss, screw it onto the faceplate of the chuck, and then you can turn the wood so it sticks out through the center concentric, push that on, and then solder it together. Now, I don't have that facility. So my question is, how do I get this so it's reasonably square, basically? So, and also strong enough as well. All this does is it carries the hour hand. So maybe soft soldering is definitely not going to hard solder it. It will just annihilate and make a mess. Let's just get the so what I'm thinking is, and be interested to know what you're thinking, of course, rummaging through the box of bits here. Maybe this plant all along, there's only plenty to repair. Yeah, possibly. I mean, and so I think there's an interesting distinction between new making and repairing old stuff. I don't really want to, I see a lot people really excited and saying, I'm going to do this, going to do that, going to show that clock who's boss and all that stuff. And my answer to that is just make a new clock. Leave the old clocks alone and make a new clock, because it's really great fun and you'll learn such a lot along the way. So there's my advice. And I'd love to do that again myself one day, but not at the moment. So how small can this hole be if we put some reinforcing material in there? Well, this end of the cannon wheel has got to fit through. So that's the only thing that fits through there. But you can see that this is relieved once it passes through the hole. So when we look when it's actually in position, there's loads of room in there. So we could actually, let's just see what the difference is. We've got 4.7 less 7, so that's 2.3, isn't it? 2.3 over 2, so that's 1.15. So we've got like at least a millimeter at either side. So we've got loads and loads and loads of space inside there, as long as this part of the cannon wheel can pass through. So I can either just tidy this up and solder it back on again. I'll just line up the two parts, because that's the beauty of it being a casting. It's actually quite broken with a nice fracture. And I think we talked about this before. You can see why it's broken, because the person that's turned it down from a casting has done a really beautiful job, and they've got the graver and they've actually cut into the corner to make it really smart looking, but it's also made it relatively weak. Probably they didn't anticipate the clock falling on the floor. So the question is, the problem is that the metal has distorted. If you look at this, you can see that it isn't quite square when it's pushed together. It's actually tilted over by a couple of degrees. So that's not going to work as it is. We do need some way of lining it up. I'm thinking about something like an engineer's tool clamp, maybe, would do it. That will be like the biggest rummaging you've ever heard of to go and find one of those. But I think that's what I have to do. If I get an engineer's tool clamp, I can clamp this, and then the jaws will kind of automatically hold those two surfaces at 90 degrees. But I'm just going to think about putting a little bit of reinforcing material in there. And I'm wondering about our good old friend, those Bourgeon bushes that we know and love. No good, don't use them for bushing, but they're great for everything else. Joke, that's a joke. So have a rummage, another rummage in here. It's big, unfortunately, that. That's too small. So just have a little. Oh, actually, this might be fine. I've didn't realize I've already cut the end down of it. So this is a bit of, it's not bushing wire. I bought it as bushing wire from, can't remember where. It's like really tough, hard drawn tube, which I think is intended to be used as bushing. It's probably fine, actually. But as you can see here, what I can do is I can reinforce the inside of the tube with a bit of this, solder the two things together, and then that will just give it that bit of strength. Then once it's soldered together, I can broach it out. So I'll probably take away 3/4 of the thickness of this tube. So rather than just having that tiny little kind of fillet of soft solder, I think what I'll do is I'll file this down, and I'll have to file it because I don't have a lathe. I don't think I do anyway. I think it's too big to go in there. Yeah, probably. Yeah, so file it down is the answer. That ends a little bit thinner. Yeah, I think that's going to work fine. So this isn't going to be, what's the word? It's purely to give that joint a little bit of support. So it's, what time we've got? Oh, it's exactly 7 o'clock. So it's time for comfort break or whatever. I'm going to go and rummage and find an engineer's tool clamp. And then during the week, I'll show you how I'll go about setting it up. During the week, I'll start the job of filing this down so it fits inside there. It's not massively different. 7.8. What do we say that was? 7 mil. So it's 0.8 of a millimeter off the diameter. Just really sticky brass, so it'll probably take quite a while to file, but it'll make the joint strong. So 5 minutes or 2 minutes or 3 minutes. I'm going to go and find a tool clamp and come back, and then we'll talk a bit more about doing this. Turn the microphone off. Mouse. So if you haven't come across one of these animals before, this is an engineer's tool clamp, reasonably, a medium-sized one, I suppose. And they're really cool because they've got hardened and tempered parallel jaws, so you can hold things without marking. They're quite heavy. And if we just open it up, you can see where I'm going to go with this. I can use that to actually stabilize the joint. Just check that it's crazy there on opening the thing up. Too much excitement. Two to 5 minute break, yeah. Found the engineer's tool clamp much easier than I thought I would. That was going to be major rummaging, but it's a beautifully organized workshop. So let's just get this clamp together without it falling apart. A bit fiddly. See it really nice way of holding things like this. A bit like G cramps, it's probably just sort of a good idea to buy a set of these. So you can see immediately it's there's something happening to my camera. What's going on? Don't know what's happening there. You can see immediately that it's brought the thing much squarer. So I can check, although the pipe is tapered, I can check with a square. And I can make tiny adjustments in that plane as well until I think that it's yeah. There's maybe a much cleverer way of doing this. So if you can think of something, then please let me know. We need a little square, but it's probably a decent tool for the job. The good thing about the square is it just gives your eye some kind of reference. I think that looks okay. So let's just think this through. What's going to happen if it's not quite square? What's going to happen is that the hour hand is not going to track. Is that right? Parallel with the dial, yeah. So the error, if there is an error, is going to be consistent. So the hour hand is always going to be slightly higher on the dial in relation to the dial, and of course the minute hand, you don't. It'll look really bad if the hands are going like this the whole time, and obviously you don't want the hands to touch, and you don't want the hour hand to touch on the dial either. However, I think that because this is a casting, once we've got it soldered back together, we can put a bit of wood on here, and once it's screwed to the front of the frame of the clock, and we can actually make tiny adjustments to it because it's going to be soldered from the inside. So I reckon that's going to work. And if we use this when we're soldering it, we're going to have to get it quite hot underneath here. But these things are, you know, it's kind of a consumable in a way. So I'm not too fussed about that. So I think that's looking good. But what I need is that bit of pipe on the inside to reinforce it, because it's just not going to be strong enough with soft solder. However, just before I start filing and wasting an hour doing that, I'm going to look at the bushes and just check that there isn't a bush that will fit in there. I think they're too small, but let's just have a little look. That's 6, 29, 5 mil. Yeah, I mean, I could use a bush. The problem with these is it's not really going to give me any advantage. It's not long enough. It's only going to stick out about 0.5 millimeter, if that. So that's kind of a nice idea, but not going anywhere. So it's back to our little bit of tube. You could actually curl a bit of brass around, actually, and for a bit more sort of silversmithing capability. Could just get a sheet. I'll say I'm going to get rid of most of it anyway. It's just to provide us with a bit of support on the inside. So let me think this through just before I start tacking it with the file. Because one end's already been turned away. So yeah, I think we're best to go for that end. Okay, let's just get a filing block, and it's going to take quite a while to file it. So that might be all we get done today. So any suggestion on what people do here, very welcome. Yeah, lie down in a darkened room, I think is the answer. The honest answer to that. But you know, get a lathe. Get a lathe, get a life. So yeah, once we've gotten this done, what's left, I hear you ask? And the answer is not a great deal. I'm going to make the hands, so that's going to be good fun. I'll probably do that. I'll explain how to do it, but I'll do that again in my kind of own sweet time. File. And so just check I've got the correct end here, that one. And then just start filing that down. We'll just measure up, and then I can keep giving myself a little bit of 7.8, and we want to be down to about 7, don't we? I think I said. Yeah. So too far. This is like probably the most boring television you've ever seen in your whole life. I think the brass is also going to be kind of really sticky. Never do too much filing. But yeah, we've got some exciting times ahead. We've got our fusee clock thing. There's a couple more really great questions that cropped up on Facebook, which I'm going to pursue, but there are so many good things to do. I've got, thanks to Dell, I've got a torsion pendulum clock to fix. Got my watch project that I'm on with at the moment, which will be finished tomorrow, all being well, which I'll make a video of, and I won't post it here, but somewhere. What else is going on? My website's up and running. Got short courses coming in the next couple of weeks as well. So sorry for all that trouble, scratching. I'll measure it now and I'll file off. Yeah, virtually nothing. It always looks like a lot, and then when you come to measure it, it's like, what on earth's going on?
Would a turn be useful in this scenario?
Shaoblin 102 lathe would be useful, Sam, in this scenario. Yeah, it might do. I mean, you could put it between centers. I could probably just about put it up between centers in my watchmaker's lathe. But the problem is the metal so sticky, is this drawn brass just doesn't turn easily. So it would be a total pig to turn with a graver. So yeah, Shaoblin 102 is the dream tool of choice. Or Myford ML7 also perfectly good. But this is all right. I mean, it seems to take a long time, but there you go. Could be worse. Could be worse ways to spend Thursday evening. Beautiful sunny Thursday evening. Yeah, the big one. John got me those from Jeremy. I'll know about this from Bewley Mortar. If Jeremy's still there, he's probably passed out with boredom from all this filing. Oh, hi Derek, nice to see you. Visitors. Derek's had visitors. He's been watching with no sound. It's great to see you, Derek. We've been talking about your torsion pendulum clock. What a term be useful. Yeah, any kind of turning device would be more useful than filing it by hand. But anyway, need all the practice I can get. So slightly wishful thinking it's going to go in the hole, but I know it's not, because we're getting there. We've filed off half what I need to file off, so it's not all doom and gloom. And I suppose what I can say, I'll get obviously endless sort of what's the word, points out of it, saying I did it the hard way. Keep changing the angle of the file, because you can probably hear once it's filed a little bit, it starts resonating. So then you've got to change the angle to prevent it from resonating. The thinner it gets, the more it'll resonate as well.
Magnus 10mm.
Perfect. If you could just bring it round, Derek, within the next 10 minutes, that would be really appreciated. That's exactly what you need, lathe. Anyway, I haven't got one here, not one. Anyway, one day. They'll keep looking, but also so many other things going on at the moment that are taking my attention. Getting there. Another 0.3 to come off. Nearly starting in the hole. I saw the collection of John Taylor has been sold, I think. Johnny Carter seems to be an agent for it or something like that. I haven't really looked into it down in Winchester. So if any of you are in that neck of the woods, that'll be worth a look. Some of the best clocks that have ever been made, John Taylor collected. I don't know why he's selling them, but it's nice to go along to the auction if you can. I used to go along and take the students up to Bonham's to see James Stratton, and it was always really good fun. I don't know whether Bonham still do, but they had a clock auction in the summer, and they had one in December as well, sort of just before Christmas. So it's nice to go up to London and do a bit of Christmas shopping and look at the clocks. And it's great because you can, it's a really, obviously a lot of these so-called posh clocks are in museums, but at an auction house, it's really fantastic because you can get hands-on, as long as you don't break anything. You can actually take the hoods off clocks and have a really good peer. And there's usually somebody around as well to help you if you need a bit of advice. So an auction for just getting close up with clocks that you might not otherwise experience is really cool. Auction viewing, anyway. Right, must be, yeah, there we are, look, it's getting there. Again, we've got our tapered joint here, so we can immediately make it a really good fit, which is what I'm after. So probably need it to extend through there about 4 or 5 mil. As I said, I'm going to broach most of it away after it's been soldered. So a few minutes of, might actually just get there before past. So what did you do this evening? I watched some bloke filing a bit of metal. It can only get better from here, can't it? No doubt everybody's turned the noise off as well because of that scraping sound. Yeah, they were at one of those antique people, weren't they, on Bond Street somewhere, wasn't I? I saw it on Facebook or something.
It's old age. He said that John Taylor said he feels someone else has to be their custodian.
Oh, okay. Yeah, fair enough. Good. Well, go for it. I think the clock for me there is much, is it, I can't remember whether it's much green or much blue that he's got. One of them is in a museum in Dresden, the other one he owns it. Oh gosh, when after the longitude, well, the second part of the longitude prize, sort of after the John Harrison phase, the Board of Longitude sort of rewrote the rules, and they said if you were to enter the prize with the timekeeper or whatever the device was, you had to make 2 identical, and so they could be put on ships and sailed around the country, around the UK, one clockwise and one counterclockwise or something like that. So Thomas Mudge made 2 timekeepers, one in blue shagreen and one in green shagreen, and they really are just the most sublime bits of clockmaking. Well, other than this bit of brass that I'm filing, of course. Other than this bit of brass, they're the most sublime bits of clockmaking you ever saw. So that's where my money would go.
Simon says 3.5 million for Trumpian clock.
Right. Yeah. I mean, a lot of those clocks are, the problem for me is that they've been in the spotlight. It's and they get the attention, of course, of a lot of restorers or clockmakers. They always, not always, but often want to work on a name, and it doesn't float my boat. But they so much kind of gets hidden, whereas lesser clocks, if you like, sort of get passed by and retain much more of the kind of surface finish and things. But yeah, a tompion would be nice. So, marine timekeeper. It's a cylindrical marine timekeeper with Mudge's constant force escapement. So it's completely hopeless as a clock, but it's really sublime work. Almost as sublime work as my joint that I've made there. Isn't that good? Really pleased with that. In fact, you can see that that's straightened the whole thing up massively. So that's all I need to do. I mean, obviously we'll tidy it up a little bit. In fact, what I might do is I might just, rather than clamping it, I might just do this and solder it actually on this piece of material, cut it through with a piercing saw, and then yeah, I'll probably do that, because you can see here that it's when it's straight, when it's square, a little bit more filing, but not a lot. I'll move to a finer file, because I know you really love that file. Cheap. Don't know where it came from. It's good file, that. It's always nice to have one like really, really sort of super coarse file for removing material like that. Let's move to something finer just to improve the texture a little bit. Square up the end. Not that it matters. Yep, I'm happy with that. I think I can fit those two components together so they're actually remarkably square. So the next thing to do is to very carefully, because of course, you remember the golden rule of soldering, the solder won't want to go inside there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to, gosh, really good fit, is I'm going to file along the length of this and find my good old 3 square file. I'm going to file along the length to put some longitudinal channels in there for the solder to flow down. Sounds very sort of romantic, but I'm not going to do it like that. It's not even cutting. I'm going to use my trusty piercing saw. Onto my finger. The right end. I'm just going to slightly randomly sew along a little bit. Remember the top tip that I said a couple of weeks ago about putting your tweezers on there to push the blade down. Yeah, so just put a kind of a notch running all the way along. I'll just put another few of those in, maybe 3 altogether. New piercing saw blade. check I get the can't see it, of course. So check I get the blade the right way around. The piercing saw, unlike the hacksaw, cuts on the pull stroke, whereas a hacksaw, of course, cuts on the push stroke. So another one. So this will save us the disappointment of soldering it all together and then finding it just falls apart again because the solder hasn't gotten into the joint. There we are. So that will help with that. I'm also going to just draw file, my favorite activity. So again, I've got my file marks running around the work. So the solder will not want to go like over the mountains. It won't want to go up and down, but it will run along the valleys. So if I just draw file it, our solder is going to run quite nicely along there. A little bit more cleaning up to do. And one of those things is I'm going to have to, gosh, such a good fit, is to scrape out inside this joint here to get some clean material again. Otherwise it won't, the solder won't stick. And then just get this lined up so that fits on there. There is a little, maybe you can't see it in the picture there, but there's a bit of the casting that sticks up. So it's quite easy to sort of lock those two parts together. And then I'll just check that they're straight. And they feel actually pretty good. So very happy with that. So I won't do it this week because we're out of time. So not so much fun, sit down. Not so much fun with our gathering pallet this week. That poor thing, it's not looking good, I must say. However, I'm going to give it one last chance. I'm going to spend a bit of time this week, clean out the flux, make a bit of that wire that goes up the middle, hopefully solder it together. If not, then I'll have a bit of metal standing by and we'll start hacking a new one out. But this, I'm really happy with this. So you can see here, it's, let's get it straight to the camera. I can work my hands. So looking good. I'm pretty happy with that. So that, again, I'll have to clean on the inside of the pipe, on the inside of the bridge, clean up the joint a little bit on the outside. But I do wonder whether I can actually run solder down the inside. Maybe that's been a little bit sort of adventurous. I don't know. I'll have to think about it. Maybe tin this first, but then wipe away most of the solder. But we'll deal with that next week. I'll finish the prep for that. I'll work on the gathering pallet a bit, unless it's fallen down and gone between the floorboards, in which case to make a new one. And see you next week, all being well. So again, super big thank you to everybody who bought our book this week and the depthing and bushing chapter. You don't need a Kindle, by the way. You can download the Kindle app. And biggest thank you of all to the How to Repair Pendulum Clocks team, sat here in the corner, keeping everybody entertained with the live chat.
Can you do one more question?
Won't the tube fall off when it's heated and expands? I think because it's tapered, Derek, what I'll do is I'll make sure that it doesn't have opportunity to fall off by maybe like holding it like that as I get my gas on it. So if anything, it's been pushed onto that spigot. I mean, already it's sort of incredibly tight, so it will expand, but of course the bit of brass inside will expand too. So I think it'll be fine. And was that the question?
Yeah.
All right, yeah. No, I think it's going to be all right. I've got a good feeling about this. And of course, when I get my hands on the clock and our hands kind of like tipping over and then sticking in the air at the other side, then of course I will pay the price. But anyway, until that point, let's not worry about it. So no, I think it's going to be good. Good feelings about that. Not so good feelings about the pearl gathering pallet. But anyhow, so good fun. Thanks for joining us. See you on Facebook with your questions, please. And that's true. The thinnest one will expand. But what I can do is I can heat this. I can get my gas here, can't I, within this chunk, and I can actually let the whole thing sort of heat slow together. But anyway, maybe you're right, and it'll drop apart. There'll be more tears. But anyway, let's see next week. So hope to see you on Saturday. As I said, thanks a lot for all your help on Facebook during the week. Really brilliant. If you've got projects, please remember, I know it's a pain, but take some time to photograph work in progress. We all love to put those projects up. Look what I've done, and that's really brilliant. But please, let's see some work in progress as well. And let's keep it going. And we'll see you, if not before, next Thursday, by which time our football team will have won the Euros, and everybody will be super happy, in good mood. Anyway, bye for now, and thanks very much.